IDEA, and I'm so honored to be here with Dr. Jennifer Williams. She is sharing all of her amazing work on climate literacy and her amazing organization, Take Action Global, or TAG. She's going to share some incredible opportunities to implement some strategies into your classroom right away, and just some bigger picture items as well. So if you at any point have questions, comments, concerns, please utilize that chat. If you go to the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little icon that says chat. You can type in there and we will answer your questions accordingly. We'll also drop the link for your professional development hour in there as well at the very end of today's session. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jen. And thank you so much for being here today, Jen.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm thrilled to be here. I love IDEA and always jump at the opportunity to be a part of anything you all are doing. So I love that this Wednesday webinar opportunity popped up. And as you were just saying, a lot of schools in your area are heading back. So thank you to everyone for tuning in, as you have, I'm sure, very busy schedules and weeks happening right now. But we'll be together for about the next hour to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is climate literacy. And so we're going to be going through a lot of updates of what's happening currently around the world and within the United States around climate action education. And then I'll go into looking at what is our role as climate action educators, and then hope to leave you with some resources and some practical ideas that you can take into the classroom this year right away. So I'm going to share my screen and get us going. I'm happy to share all the resources from today as well, including our deck. And I'll have to get us back to the front. We're going to go through starting with what do we even mean by climate literacy and climate action education. So just to give a little context, my background is in the literacy side, not in terms of science. So reading, writing, listening, speaking. I am a former speech-language pathologist, and I was a literacy specialist, a school principal, and then moved out of K-12 in 2014 to higher ed, where I get to work with future teachers, and then in my work with Take Action Global, working with educators from all around the world. So I never thought I would land in this world of environmental science and climate action education, but really, in my mind, every educator can be a climate action educator, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. So as I mentioned, I love IDEA and have been so grateful to be a part of many of your events. I was at, I think the last in-person event I did for a while was in 2020 with you all in February. I loved being a part of that event. I've been a part of IDEA U, some online events, and really love working with Lindsay and the team. So thank you for being with us today. And hopefully this will be an opportunity, if you've been a part of some of the things we've done, like our Teach Boldly book club, where we've talked a lot about student action and activism, or some of our IDEA sessions where we've talked about the SDGs. This really narrows into this idea of climate literacy and bringing climate action education into the classroom. So probably like the majority of you all joining in, and if you're members of IDEA and come to this conversation from an ed tech perspective. So that's really how I got involved in a lot of this work, is trying to find ways to use ed tech with a purpose. So using ed tech for social good. And so this conversation around climate literacy really brings me back as a teacher to about 2010, when we started to see this shift in ed tech from being isolated and really only a part of IT, and every educator starting to see that they could bring educational technology across the curriculum. So all content areas using technology in the art classroom, in math classrooms, fourth grade classrooms, even physical education. So I'm really seeing something similar happen around now ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, and that's not reserved anymore for our environmental science classrooms that are in only high schools. It is really starting to go across the curriculum. So we'll talk about some of those ideas of how you can bring climate literacy into your class, no matter what you teach. If Education for Sustainable Development is new for you, I look to this definition from UNESCO that talks about allowing every human being to acquire the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values necessary to shape a sustainable future. And this definition really makes sense to me about everything that I want to do as an educator. So I look to this and say, okay, so me as a professor or as a literacy specialist, of course I want to support our students in preparing them for their future that is safe, healthy, on a planet that is thriving. And you'll hear other terms. So ESD is one term. Looking at climate literacy, for us, we talk a lot about climate action education. And so looking at the best things that are happening right now in our world around climate, climate sciences, climate action, climate change, that work, pairing it with the best practices in education. So how are we transforming education using inquiry, perspective taking, incorporating well-being and SEL, using EdTech for a purpose? And then kind of that collision where we have climate and education coming together in activating our students through action. So climate action education is really what we're going to talk about today, but you may hear it referred to as other things like ESD or maybe climate literacy. So to help frame our conversation too, I know when I started into this work, I didn't really know if I was supposed to be here. I was like, I'm not a skilled climate scientist. I don't know everything about what we should be doing to protect our planet. But I do have this passion around connecting students and supporting them to take action on things that they care about, which we know when we talk to our young people. Climate action is the very top of the list. Also, race relations, human rights, all of these topics coming together and giving them a space to take action to do good. So when we think of climate action educator, really we narrow it down to these are people that care about climate action and they care about education. And just like with EdTech in around 2010, this can be anyone. So any educator across the content area at any grade level. So we have this awesome community now of climate action educators. We've been doing this work with our nonprofit. So we're a team of teachers that have come together from around the world, and we've locked arms with other educators who really care about moving this work forward. And so we've asked them through our programs, what does it mean to be a climate action educator? And words that they use, really, these are the top 5 that we hear them say. Climate action educators are curious, they're counterintuitive, they're inclusive, they're collaborative, they're committed. And so all of these words that we hear when we talk about climate action education also sound like words that we use when we talk about transforming education. What do we want our students to do in these innovative classrooms? Of course, we want them to be curious learners. We want to have inclusive classrooms where we're focusing on equity and ensuring everyone has access to ideas and opportunities and information. How can we make these opportunities more collaborative, making sure our students can work with people who live and look differently from them? And then a sustained commitment. So there's so much happening right now in our classrooms, but how can we stay the course to ensure that we can have some impact for the future? So that is our idea of what is a climate action educator. So really, the answer is pretty simple. It's us all, and it can be us all. But what about climate action education? What are we walking into as climate action educators? And so right now we observe that the approaches to climate education are quite uneven. So I talk to schools in different parts of the world all day long, and everyone has a different story to tell. We have some schools that have full commitment to climate action education, climate literacy, and support of their governments with full funding, where other schools I talk to, it may be that one lone teacher who has started this work and is trying to move forward and find others to join with. So it's very uneven. It's also subjective. So a lot of this work around climate education, we as teachers haven't necessarily been trained in terms of climate education. That is not part of our professional development or part of our pre-service teacher as university students. I was looking at a program this morning in Michigan, though, that now has full commitment at the university to climate education, and they're talking about this with their pre-service teachers. But for a lot of people, especially people my age who've been doing this for a long time, this is something we're kind of having to go out and learn on our own. So we do see that it is subjective with bias, with interest, expertise, political views. It's also lacking coherence, varies from class to class, school to school, country to country. We don't have those horizontal, vertical alignments. And then it can be consumption over action. So reading about climate change in a textbook as opposed to taking action through project-based learning. So these are the things that we've been seeing happening over the past decade. But we're at a point now where that's shifting, and it's shifting really fast. So even in the last 18 months, and I will talk a little bit about this, there have been tremendous gains even within the United States. So a couple exemplars for us to look to. First, Italy. They were the first country to mandate climate education for all students. So they have sustainability as a theme across all subject areas with 33 mandatory hours of climate education per year per student. So they're rocking it. They've committed as a country to move forward. We're also seeing similar commitments with Mexico and Kenya. And then if you're familiar with the work that's happening in New Jersey, so probably not far from many of you, they in 2020 became the first and still only U.S. state to adopt climate education for all students. So now that is mandated across every grade level, every content area. So all students K through 12 will have that incorporated into their standards, which is super cool. So other states are starting to follow suit. There's some great climate literacy initiatives in California that we look to, Minnesota, Michigan, Maine, with now a commitment of PD, starting with professional development. I have been having some cool conversations in DC and Miami-Dade. So there's a lot of hope for what's happening right now. And teachers who are a part of this conversation are really shaping the dialogue around climate education. Another country that we've partnered with, full country of the Philippines, and they have a law that requires each student to plant 10 trees to graduate. That's part of their graduation requirement. So they have the Graduation Legacy for the Environment Act, and that will add 525 billion plus trees to be planted by our young people. So what a gift that they're giving them. So we have hope. We have a lot of exemplars that we can look to. And bringing us back to it's all. We can all be a part of this conversation, and all of our small actions collectively, I believe, as teachers and students, can add up to significant change. So returning to our question of what is climate action education? So we have a commitment in this pursuit of climate education for all. So we're a nonprofit organization. We have a mission of climate education for all. We have some really great partners with the UN and WWF and NASA that are helping us along the way. But these are the things we've been committing to. So first off, informing the body of knowledge and research around this work. So we know that this is an evolving conversation. There's a lot of new interest in this work, especially in the US right now, that is moving forward fast, as I mentioned. So we want to be able to bring the voices of teachers and students right into that policy. So we're working in terms of research. We also want to contribute to the understandings of climate education and progress towards systemic adoption of climate education. So we know that we have those lone teachers in schools who are doing the work. Teachers in environmental studies, they've been doing this work their whole career. So I think we can really look to them to help guide where do we head as a nation, as states, as districts, as schools, and then of course as classroom leaders. And then talking openly about where our teachers are feeling in terms of capacity, level of comfort, where do they need support in terms of professional development, and how can they feel comfortable bringing climate education into our classrooms. So it's one thing to say, awesome, we're going to commit to K-12 education, we're going to mandate this, but how can we ensure that our teachers are prepared to do that? So for us, we really believe it's not if it's going to happen across the US, it's really when. And then finally, we believe our work as a united group of teachers around the world who are doing climate action education is providing feedback. So how are we monitoring those standards, measuring impact, talking about quantitative and qualitative methods for measuring impact within the classroom, and bringing those best practices with teaching and learning into this work. So that was a lot of words to say back to our ideas of climate action education. What is working? So when we break it down into those three parts, which we always try to do, first in terms of climate change, what is working? So we know that if it's at a systems level, that's going to make more impact. If it's sustainable, rather than just something that is a one-off, we're going to see more impact. And then, of course, we're always basing that on science. So we're talking to our students about how they can go out as critical consumers of information. They can find those trusted experts, vet that data, make sure that it is based on science. And those are great activities to begin with in the classroom when we're talking about climate literacy. Hopping over to the education side, so what works when we're thinking of effective educational programs? So ensuring that they're culturally responsive. Do we have equitable programs? And having everyone be a part of the conversation around climate change. We also believe an integrated approach is really what's going to work best. So finding what's working well within our classrooms and building on that. So we don't want the work around climate literacy to be isolated to just that environmental science class. How can we bring that in and incorporate it into what we're doing in everyday lessons? Just like we did with EdTech back in 2010. We brought it in. And then interdisciplinary, so across the content areas, making sure that we're looking at ways teachers can work together to move forward for change. And then finally back to the center, which is what we're all about, which is action. Action for change, what works? We want it to be active. We want it to be collective. We want it to be experiential. So when we talk to our teachers in these professional development settings, and we've been saying this for 12, 14 years, try to move out of the front of the classroom, co-construct with your students. And this is the perfect opportunity to do that, because you can come in, have this topic that's new to you and say, let's move forward together. I'm interested in learning. Do you want to join with me? How can we move into this idea of research? So active, collective, experiential. So I'm going to show you some ideas of what I'm seeing that's working well. I'd like to start, before I do that, just to bring it into some of the skills that we're talking about building. So these competencies that we're preparing our students for with green jobs. So we can think of these almost as green skills. And if you look at them, I love this information that comes out of Brookings, because these are a lot of the skills that we're focused on in our classrooms today. And definitely a lot if you're working with IDEA, and if you come from an ed tech background, we are looking at these. So systems thinking, creativity, empathy, flexibility, growth mindset. These are all the things that we are trying to find ways to integrate into our classroom. So now we're taking them and we're kind of giving them wings, because we're saying, all right, so we know we want you to develop skills around empathy. It's really hard to do that when you're reading about these stories in a textbook. But what happens when we pair students up with people on a different part of the world to talk about something like climate change? What does climate change look like for you? I can tell you when I'm on calls, it doesn't matter if it's a different part of the United States or a different part of the world. I'll talk to a school in Jamaica and they're like, we are seeing firsthand the effects of climate change. Me here in Florida, I'm like, we're being bombarded with hurricanes. We're seeing the results of what's happening with our planet and climate change. I'll talk to a group in Michigan and they'll say, we are living it. So everyone has their story to tell around this. So those skills around empathy, it's really easy to develop in these conversations. So some teachers that have been doing this work, they're using educational technology to document the learning, the growth, to share out those stories, to explore their local world, and then bring that to this global stage. So let me unshare so I can pop over. This story I'm going to share with you first. I love this. So this was a group, they had done work as part of our goals project, decide what they wanted to do, and they were looking at life below water. And this is the group there. So they're in Malaysia, and as the final part of the project, they had to create a link. So and I'll show you some other ones. Some of our schools who participate, they might make an online book, or some might make a website, or some might have a theater production. This group chose to use Wakelet to document their journey. And when they were looking at how do they address life below water, they wanted to find out about how could they support and rebuild the local coral reef. So they didn't know a lot about, first off, the SDGs. So they documented here showing about their research. They then needed to learn from an expert. And so they Skyped in with an expert, a diver. Then they got to have opportunities for more research to learn about coral and coral reefs. They used Minecraft to build and design coral cages. And then they built their own. This was done in less than 6 weeks. So they built their own coral cage and went and planted it in their local waters. And so, like, what a cool documentation of that process. So you can see them here doing that. So that's one project. Let me come back over and share another one. But this is to show you that you don't need a lot of resources. You just need to have some space and some time and an interest to take these ideas forward. So this next group, so they decided to use, different from Wakelet, they used Google Slides, and they wanted to document their project, and they were looking at this SDG around industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and how they could protect the planet with small actions in terms of lunch. So they had this essential question: how much trash do we use in one lunch period? They answered their question from the beginning, which said too much. And so to answer through data, they focused on gathering up that trash. So you can see here, we as a class looked at how much trash our school produced. These were the unfortunate results. So they gathered the trash, they washed it, so they collected it, and then they decided to make the trash into a beautiful art project that could be displayed in front of the cafeteria. So you see here they have this mural that is the whole globe, and they used trash to represent the continent. So this was their advocacy campaign. And just like the other group, they were able to do this in under 6 weeks. So it's all student created. we're looking at some of those skills, those green skills that we're going to be using to prepare our students for their future jobs. And then one more to show you, which is pretty cute. I'll come back over to my deck. Here we go. All right, awesome. So hopefully you see my deck. So you see those two projects. This is a classroom, and they decided to write, compose, and then share a song that they created called The Land. So I'll play this for you, and it's a couple minutes long.
We go to High Meadow School. We are the legendary Lions. We wrote this song called The Land.
I love the end. So you can see there the students represented, and that was done with their music teacher. So super cool. Let's see if I can move past it. Great. So those are just some examples to show you that this can be done across the curriculum. So as students of all ages, they're taking that idea of education for sustainable development, taking action for the planet, and all of these different ways that they can do that, which is meaningful to them, not something that could have been prescriptive. If I would have said, all right, we're going to all make a Wakelet, then, you know, would we have had the same results? So trying to leave it as open-ended and personalized as possible. So all right, let's kind of take it. So we've talked about what do we mean in terms of this idea of climate literacy, climate action education, climate action educators. Where do we all as teachers fit in? And then what's currently happening around climate action education globally within the states? And then how can we bring that individually into our own classrooms? So I wanted to share some resources and ideas for you if you're looking to bring climate action into your classroom this year. So we have ideas in terms of, first off, access and methods. So we're always starting with accessibility, then moving into resources, and finishing up with community. So I'll start with resources, or I'll start with access and then move to resources. So with, if we think about access to climate action education, we've had a bit of a design challenge because we have this project that we run, and so we have one project, 6 weeks, everyone can join. We have about nearly 3 million teachers and students participating at this point, as young as age 4, all the way up through grade 12, and even some university learners. And then we have some schools that are approaching this with sustainability in mind. They've been doing this work for a long time. Some, they're just beginning and don't have a lot of resources. Some have 3 devices per student. Some, we have teachers who are using their own personal phones with Wi-Fi. So how do you design a project for the world around climate when you have all of those variables? So for us, we start with inquiry and empathy, always. And we move through this idea of an appreciative inquiry model. And so the acronym here is AI. It's a different kind of AI than a lot of us think of. But here, in terms of appreciative inquiry AI, this is a process of valuing and drawing out the strengths and successes in the history of a group, community, or organization. So I love this because you can see next it talks about realistic and realizable vision for the future. I think about classrooms today and how much we as teachers need to accomplish. So sometimes when I talk to teachers, they're like, this sounds great, but how do I add one more thing? How is that even possible to fit it in? So I had mentioned earlier, building on what's already working. So if you're an art teacher, if you are that teacher that wants to create a coral reef, building on what you're already doing. So AI allows us to do that. And so here it ends by saying it creates a positive mindset by talking about success, that rather than being defined by past failures, which also brings a lot of optimism for me, even on this topic of climate, because sometimes people can get quite bogged down by how big it is. Like, how can I, one person, possibly do one thing to help? There's been so much in the past that brought us to this moment. How do we move forward? So instead of looking back and looking at what's not working, it's what's working well and how can we take action on that? So when we look at it in terms of education, and all of this is outside of education, really, this appreciative inquiry, talking about an asset-based approach, they're really more like a systems level thinking. So, but for me, it's a perfect fit for our classroom. So how can we focus on those assets, resources, strengths, aspirations, rather on that deficit model, building agency and optimism? So sometimes people, when they think about climate literacy or climate action, they think about those mobs of children in the streets that are angry and revolting, which there is a place for that, and that is happening. Our young people are angry, they're frustrated. But I also see some young people, like in those examples I just showed you, who are operating on optimism. They're saying, we're going to take action in our classrooms based on the research that we're doing, the projects that we're participating in. This approach also positions our students, which that's our little community, our classrooms of students as our community, as co-producers. So they're not consumers anymore. They are actually empowered to create. So we talk about agency there as students, as creators, different from that passive recipient of information. Remember where we said, get out of the front of the classroom. How can you get down and co-create with your students? Here we're talking about that again. I love that it has local people are the answer. So we talk about global, we talk about this big conversation around climate, but we look at local. How can we together locally start to activate and make a difference? So everyone has something to contribute. And then those questions, as opposed to what is wrong, how do I fix it? Which I've always been a little resistant to things like problem solution, which in our Western world can be really easy to fall into. Project-based learning, problem-based learning. People will say, okay, let's identify a problem and then let's put all the solutions out, which is a good start, but that can be very much limited in terms of resources. So if you have resources, it's easy to identify problems and it's easy to identify solutions. But what happens when you don't have those resources to identify solutions? So instead, what is working and how do we do more of what works? So that's in terms of access to climate literacy. I start with that appreciative inquiry approach, asset-based community development. So next up is resources. Teachers are hungry for really great resources. I can tell you right now, in terms of climate, it's getting to be very noisy. It's hard for me as a teacher to go out and say, all right, great, where do I begin? I see all of these different things. So when I talk about resource selection, there are a few things that I'm going to look at. in my search. First is relationships and connections between community members and communities. So my number one resource is always going to be people. And how can I find out a way to connect with people who are already doing the work? Community of practice around climate, that's what we've been hoping to build. Resources that have success in changing attitudes and mindsets around climate action and climate education. So we really do believe that we have an opportunity to change mindsets around action that will then change the course of the future. The students in our classrooms today, like truly are going to build our future. And so giving them those green skills that they're going to need as they go forward, and just having that schema and saying, oh, well, I live in the Philippines. It mattered to someone that I needed to plant a number of trees to graduate. That must be something important. Maybe I need to find out why that's important. How do I bring that into my job as a firefighter? Anything that I'm doing. Mobilization of community members to organize and take action. So are the resources that I'm using helping me to do that? And then can I leverage those resources to create positive change? Finally, interest and movement to bring climate education to schools through these democratized, community-driven efforts. So back to the first point, all about people. How can we distribute that out so it's not, okay, this is mandated, here's your check box that you need to make sure to check, but instead, here's an idea, how can you make that work for you within your classroom? So not having that be too prescriptive. And here are a few resources that I wanted to share that we've been working on developing and distributing out. So this is a good resource to get started. So if you're early on in the climate literacy work, or even if you've been part of the work and you want to take it to the next level and join with a group that is trying to find ways to ensure that all students have access, we partnered actually on Earth Day, so in April, with the Earth Day organization. And if you were like me, like a couple years ago, I didn't even realize Earth Day was an organization. I just thought it was like a special day that we had in school, but it is an organization, and they're leading this work around taking care of our planet. So we partnered up with Earth Day and Fridays for the Future, which is Greta Thunberg's organization, to launch this climate literacy petition. So we have teachers and students signing this petition that you can see here, these 8 points. We talk about access, equity, availability, integration across disciplines, PD, support for climate anxiety, active citizenship, innovation and infrastructure. So everything we've kind of talked about leading up to this slide. So the climate literacy petition is a great place for you to start. You could check it out. You could look at it with your students and say, I have this petition. I'm wondering about your input on this. How do you think we're doing on these 8 points? You could survey them, do a little action research within your own classroom. So that's one place to start. Another is we have a student-facing free app, the Earth Project app, that you and your students in your classroom can download if you have access and permission to use apps in your classroom. And this supports students to see the actions that they take. What is the difference that they're creating in terms of carbon and for the planet? So you'll see here when students create their accounts, they can set goals, they can look at ways that they can stop using single-use plastics. There's opportunities for teachers and parents to create accounts. We do have a calendar input. So are you doing those actions daily, monthly? How are you going to change your daily activities to protect the planet? And then my favorite part of the app is this collaborative feature. So you can create a team. So you could do it with your students. Your students might want to create it with a global team so they can have buddies, and then they can have an opportunity to join, take action, and get on the leaderboard. So that's our Earth Project app, and that's for students age 13 and above. This is our book list. So last year, we started to see that a lot of teachers were looking to build out their own classroom libraries and have books that supported this cause. So we decided to work together with, we had, I think, 22 global educators who are already doing this work across the curriculum, across the grade levels, and we worked with them to curate a collection of books called the Climate Action Book List for classrooms. And so we have book recommendations for, we have picture books, early childhood, all the way up through adult learners, so professional development. We do have some books in different languages. We have two tagging systems. One is for different climate topics. So each book has been reviewed to talk about, is this focusing on energy or water or fast fashion? And then we have tagging for diversity. So diversity represented with the author illustrator, diversity representation in characters or content, and then diversity abilities or circumstances, and finally gender issues. So you can see one page of the Climate Action Book List here talking about these two books. And then each of our curators, our teachers from around the world, gave their best ideas for ways you can use those books in the classroom. So that's free. You can check that out too. And then our last resource that I wanted to share with you today is actually a project. So we have this big goal that we want to bring climate action education to everyone. So right now we have teachers and students who are participating in our program from 146 countries. We are hoping to find ways that anyone who wants to participate in this work, that they can join in and that they will have access. And so we have our newest program. We piloted it last year with 250 global schools. And this year, next month, we are getting ready to start our Climate Actions Schools. So this is in partnership with some awesome groups, including LEGO. It's co-authored with WWF. We have our friends from NASA and Cartoon Network. And as I mentioned, Fridays for the Future and Earth Day. We are an official partner of UN with Global Goals Week. So we'll be in New York City next month talking about SDG 4, which is quality education for all, and how we can bring teachers and students into this work at that level of the UN. So we'll know a lot more in a month from now, but big things are happening in terms of education and climate on that national stage. So what does the Climate Action Schools program look like? So we're bringing in what we've been working on with global collaboration. So our schools that have an opportunity to work together as part of a team of 4 schools. We're incorporating digital agency and action, PBL, focus on equity, and then teacher recognition of learning through digital badges. So excited, and we talked a little bit about this at IdeaU, but to team up with IDEA to create a cohort of schools in Illinois that will be our climate action schools moving forward with an Illinois-specific initiative. So we're going to be kicking that off, and I'll tell you a little bit about it and then ways that you can get more information after today's session. So this is a 10-month school-wide climate education experience. We do have, actually, it says here K to 12, but we really do have some early childhood classrooms participating, which we're super excited about. There's certification for climate action educator. We have a new certification that is the specialist level. So that's our climate coordinator at the school. And then the whole school will be certified and we'll get this awesome banner as a climate action school. So we have a community of practice for our teachers to work in, and then they'll be guided over the course of the year with monthly activities. So we already have some schools who are getting ready for next month. So just to show you the diversity in our schools, this is a school, an outdoor ed school in Hawaii, very small, 40 students, and they are rocking it with climate education. They're doing so many awesome things. So we're thrilled to have them. Crossing over the planet, we have a school in Indonesia, and they have a Finnish Waldorf framework that they're going to be applying to our Climate Action Schools program. You see here, K through grade 8. I mentioned that school in Jamaica. So this is a school, they are in the port. So all of those cruise ships that come in, when I said they're feeling the effects of climate change, they are living it. And so this is a tourist community. They get thousands of tourists coming in every day. And so they're going to be joining and sharing about their perspectives living in Jamaica, which is super cool. This school, which actually is not an organized school, it's an organized group of children in very, very rural Cambodia. So we've partnered with the university there, and we'll be working with 50 students. And the only way they can access, so we talk again about accessibility, the only way that they can access the education and the curriculum is through Raspberry Pi. So the university is going to take all of the curriculum, and it gives me goosebumps. They're going to take all of the curriculum, put it on Raspberry Pi. Their pre-service teachers are going to ship it out to these rural parts of Cambodia, and they've already decided what they want their project to be. They want to look at rural farming practices within Cambodia. And if you know of anyone in a rural part of the US, that's who they've already requested. They're like, we know who we want to partner with. We want to work with a rural school in the United States, and we want to work together to create books about these indigenous farming practices that the world could learn from. I was like, yes, we absolutely want to do that. That's a really cool school or program in Cambodia. All the way back to the US with this district in New Jersey. They have a district-wide commitment to the Climate Action Schools program. As I mentioned, New Jersey, the first state to mandate climate education, and this district serves students with special needs. So students with special needs come from 30 neighboring districts to be a part of these schools, and so they're going to be joining and sharing their voices and their ideas. So this is just to show you, back to our original idea, every person in education can be a part of this work. Climate action educators, climate action students, and then now we're taking it to the level of the schools. So we'll share more on this, but looking at the school will come together with this commitment. There is a new role, which is what we call a climate champion. That is like our hero at the school who will be leading the charge. The climate champion doesn't have to have any background in climate education. It's really back to those first 2 points, really caring about climate action and caring about good quality teaching and learning. And so we're going to be working with the climate champions for the first 2 months, so we won't be introducing the rest of the program to our climate action educators until later on, probably November, December. And then we'll bring in students in December, and then January we move forward with our global activities, which will be 2 parts. One is going to be around a global experience. So every school participating this year will be moving through a tree planting experience. So every school will be able to identify a keystone species, a tree or a plant native to their local area. They'll have opportunities to talk to local experts, find a place that they're going to plant that special tree or plant, and then we'll have a big event on Earth Day in April where all of our participating schools will plant those trees. Then we're going to look at that in terms of carbon, offsets, data collection, and add all that together. While that's happening, we're going to have each school, as I mentioned, partner up with 3 other schools to move through that asset finding mission, find out what's working really well, and how do they build on that together. So we might have schools create a community garden, or maybe that they'll create an outreach program at with their local community. Or maybe they want to create a website of resources that they can share to teach others about the work that they've been doing, or books like Cambodia. So we open it up. We have no idea what those ideas are going to be, which is the best part for us. And then they'll move through the course of the school year to create those actions, and then they'll share them out in April. So we are getting ready to kick off that year. We'll have the community portal for teachers, so they'll have an opportunity to share their ideas. And then within Illinois with IDEA, we're cooking up something special that you all can be a part of that then we'll take in May and present. So we'd love, if you're interested in learning more, we'd love to hear from you. You can contact Lindsay on the IDEA side. You can send me a message, and we will be able to connect you with anything you need to answer your questions and see if this is the right fit for you and your school for this year. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to see if we have any questions or final remarks from Lindsay and the team.
So empowering, so exciting to see globally what's happening in other schools at such young ages sometimes. You know, just the fact that Coral Reef project was, the fact that that was 6 weeks, that's mind-blowing. And it just reminds you that once you just remove like the mental barriers that you have, you know, like, oh, I don't have enough time, or we don't have enough tools, or what. Just try it and see how far the kids are going to take it. And more oftentimes than not, we'll be surprised.
It's really special. It's special to be a part of this movement right now. I have my university students, and they come in with like bright eyes, and they can't wait to get their first classroom, and they know their why. They're really secure in that. And then, you know, they'll go out, and it's tough to be a teacher. I talk to them about that. It's really hard. But we have teachers participating in these projects, and they'll come, and, you know, we're kind of void of rubrics and those step-by-step directions. And they are saying, you returned us to our why, being a part of a project like this, because we all get into teaching. I think we all can say we get into teaching because we want to change the world. We want to make a difference. And sometimes that can, you know, get pushed along to the sides, but this brings it back front and center. And it can connect to the exact standards that we have to do. So it's a special moment right now, I think, to be a teacher, to be a part of this work. And we're just so grateful to you all for giving us space to talk about it.
It's incredible, and it shows how limitless a teacher's reach really is. And nobody is just a teacher, but it's just so empowering to be able to have the opportunity to be a part of these movements. So some really great stuff, and we've got more coming down the pipeline in collaboration with TAG and with Jen, and hopefully we've inspired you today to really take that first step into climate literacy, because like Jen was saying, everybody has a stake in this game, and, you know, small movements turn into big movements too. So I put the link for your professional development hour in the chat. If you do have any issues accessing that, no worries, just send us a quick email. We'll make sure you get your credit for that. But big thank you to Jen for taking the time to create this presentation and just share this amazing story. I'll make sure that we get you a recap email tomorrow of the recording and all of the links that Jen shared today, so that you can start your journey of climate literacy with your students as soon as possible. So thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks to Heather and your team as well.